Hi everyone, this is CJ Salayo, one of the members of the core adjudication panel in this year's Philippine AP Nationals. I know that preparing for nationals is a challenge because considering that there's a lot to matter load, a lot of rounds to debate in, a lot of technical skills to improve as a debate or judge. And I think because of that, there is one important part of AP debating that is often ignored when it comes to preparation for a tournament, and that is how you prepare debate rounds with your teammates. Basically, if you prepped well with your team, that will bring you good results in debate rounds. A good prep means having a good case. A good prep gives you so much confidence entering the round. A good prep will help you always figure out things that happened in the debate because you are sure you know the right case too well. Which is why in this lecture, we will try to answer what makes a good prep. And to those who are struggling as a team when it comes to prepping, I hope this video will help you. So this lecture will be divided into three parts. First, we are going to talk about the prep master and the other prep roles. Second, I will show you the prep structure I learned throughout the years of debating and what every prep function entails. And lastly, I am going to provide key reminders that teams could refer to during case preparation. But despite this, I want everyone to remember that this is just a guide, and you as a team still create your own destiny and strategy. I mean, you know your team more than I know it, right? So, this lecture is just a summary of what I've learned for the past 5 years that I have been doing this sport. But more than that, this is also based on previous lectures on team preparation. Some of the things I included here also came from a lecture of an alumna that also did a video for team prep in AP, also for PIDC. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of resources available for you, and each one offers a different perspective on how you should approach your prep. So if this lecture does not resonate with you, you can check other resources as well. All right, then, let's talk about the prep master and other prep roles. But first, who anyway is a prep master, right? So a prep master is the person in the team who facilitates the case preparation and often decides how the prep should go. In short, you are the leader of your team during prep time. Your teammates will trust your call. Your teammates will trust your gut in most parts of the prep. There are three key qualities that a prep master should have, and we will discuss it one by one. First, a prep master should have a clear sense of direction of how the prep should go and be able and be the one to identify first what needs to be answered by a team. Again, your teammates will trust your gut in most parts of the prep. Therefore, the strategy of the team during prep will come from and will be implemented by the prep master. So if the prep master is also confused about how you should approach the round, then the entire team will enter the round confused as well. Second, the prep master should be an effective communicator when it comes to feeding the arguments to the first speaker. So it's not enough that you have a clear sense of direction. You have to be able to communicate it properly as well. And if you're going to observe the patterns of your team during prep, your first speaker delivers a bad speech when the prep master feeds them scattered ideas. That is because even if the prep master knows a lot about the topic and knows how the arguments should be run, if they cannot translate it to their first speaker, it will still have a bad outcome. But lastly, the prep master should be calm and composed and be able to ensure that all team members focus on the discussion and case preparation no matter what. In debates, emotions are high. Sometimes you will fight during prep because you are going nowhere, or your first speaker wasn't able to catch everything that you said. As the prep master, you have to control your emotions because you will also be the first person who will put things back together during prep. Given these qualities, who should be the prep master? Preferably, the deputy speaker or whip speaker of the team should be the prep master to remove the burden from the first speaker who will write and organize their speech. I also think it's intuitive to not let your first speaker lead the team, considering that they have to write their speech. So it's better if the first speaker just listens to what the second or third speaker is feeding them and write them in the most structured way possible. But that doesn't mean that the first speaker will not be doing anything anymore. while the first speaker will most likely not be the one to facilitate the case preparation, they are responsible for ensuring the prep master that they understand the case properly. So the first speaker should always also be a good communicator. So you will always have to clarify what you don't understand, and you will always have to question what you think does not make sense. So you could tell your prep master, can you slow down because I cannot catch up well, or things like, I don't think it's a good analysis because it still does not prove why X is an incentive to do Y. Basically, aside from the prep master, the first speaker is also crucial, and their ability to digest the case properly will also be a make or break for your team. All right. Now that we're able to discuss prep roles, let us now proceed to the prep structure. Again, this structure is just a guide. You do you. But I think the non-negotiable reminder here is that teams should not consume the entire 30 minutes for case prep alone. Remember, you will still veto motions, and sometimes your opponent is unresponsive, and it will cover at most 10 minutes of prep time. So the strategy must always be just 15 to 20 minutes of case preparation, and you should be used to that in practice or tune-up debates. So this is the sample prep structure. This is almost similar to the structure from one of the lectures I referred to when making the slides, except that I have accounted for the veto process and added some important things that need to be identified during the prep. But I think what the slide tells, even if you don't want to follow the structure, is that you are three in a team. So you have to be able to delegate tasks properly. You cannot tell me as well that you cannot only have two people building an argument, because in BP, we do that, right? Another important thing to note is that in this structure, I included two important functions. One is answering the basic questions, and the other one, which is the last, is the wrapping up of the prep. I'm going to discuss them later, but let's talk about the veto process first. When ranking the motions, it must be clear within the team what is the hardest burden you have to defend on the two motions you will possibly debate. Because when vetoing motions, you don't rank based on arguments that you will run, right? You veto motions based on what you need to defend. And obviously, there's only two motions that you could possibly debate because you vetoed the other one. So before vetoing, it must be clear within the team that you can answer the hardest burden for these two motions. An important note as well is that while waiting for the other team, the prep master should start thinking of arguments they could run for the two motions. I mean, do not waste your time waiting for your opponent. Again, team prep should be strategic and time efficient, so you have to make the most out of that 13 minutes. Okay, when you already identify the motion to be debated, the first thing you should answer are the basic questions. First, what will most likely be the debate? This is non-negotiable. This must always be the first question. Is it a debate about values, a debate on trade-offs, a debate about trends? And from there, you can further specify them into your team's burden, right? So if this is the debate, what then is our burden? What then is our goal? And lastly, before you proceed to the rest of the prep, you should be able to briefly discuss how to answer your hardest burden, just to assure yourself that the debate can be winnable for your side. The second non-negotiable thing in prep is to build your world. From the prep structure, it will involve the three speakers because you all need to understand what your world is, because your arguments must tie back to that world, which explains why whip speakers should also participate in the world building process. Let's talk about the context or framing. I'm pretty sure there are other lectures specifically for this, but just to flag some key aspects, I think it's important that teams discuss this very properly during prep. Where does the debate exist? What are the common denominators of developing countries? Where is the movement right now? These questions need to be answered at the start of the world building so you can have a guide on up to what extent you should defend a particular value or model. The second, obviously, is the stance, which is almost always intuitive in the motion. But I think not all the time the extent of what you have to defend is intuitive. So you have to be able to discuss that within your team as well. Third is to mechanize your policy or model. Again, there are separate lectures for this online, but what you need to remember during team prep is that policies and models are something that you don't rush discussing. Sometimes you lose by having a bad or unclear policy. The three of you then must ensure that you tape all the holes your opponent could possibly spot. What about the poor, Well, where will the money go? What are the checks and balances for a policy? You need to answer them all. Last are the argument prompts. So from the structure, it suggests that only two will build the arguments, but the third speaker builds the second argument while the other two speakers discuss the first. You need to decide what are the arguments your first speaker will run before proceeding to the argument construction. All right, the wrap-up process. Wrapping up covers the last 5 minutes of prep. The first thing you should do in the wrap-up is for first speakers to provide a rundown of what they will run in their speech. So this is the model, this is the label of our arguments, this is how I'm going to preempt this argument. But more importantly, after the first speaker wraps up, the team needs to identify the value of the first speaker's speech. Is the first speaker's speech compelling? Was the content of the speech valuable? What will the judge get out of their speech? The reason why this is important is because for sure your opponent will try to destroy the first speaker's speech as soon as they can, because there is an assumption that they will provide the foundation for your cases, right? So if you know the value of the first speaker's speech, it will be easier for you to bring them back and explain them as the debate progresses. And lastly, once everything is clear, briefly discuss the extension of the deputy speaker so they can build them while your first speaker is speaking. At the end of all this, the most important takeaway is that you need to get everyone moving in the prep. So the prep master cannot do it alone, right? The first speaker cannot always rely on what's being fed to them and things like that. You all have your roles, and all of you must be in agreement on what to bring with you during the prep, or like at the time the prep ends, rather. The last part of this lecture is discussing the key reminders during prep. The first is to own your role. You have to stay committed to your responsibility during prep. So if you are the prep master, as much as possible, you should not space out or have a mental block. Again, it's inevitable in some instances, but that's why we are practicing our training, right? To prevent those things from happening. The second reminder is to always go back to your burden. During prep, you will say a lot of things. And sometimes for the sake of just having an argument that a first speaker could run to reach the 7 minute mark, you will say things that are already beyond what you need to defend. You have to always go back to what your burden is in the debate. You have to be vigilant because sometimes you're underproving, but the more dangerous thing is when you're overproving things that you tend to add your burden in the round. So you need to be able to avoid that. Third, and most obviously, is to manage your time as a team. If you plan to only build the first argument for 5 minutes, build your first argument for 5 minutes. Or in the worst case that it's impossible, time management is also dependent on how you allocate tasks within the team during prep. So more than committing to the time you allot for each prep function, the first reminder still applies that you need to commit to your role during prep. And the last reminder is that you can only do so much. I know debate topics are rich and there's a lot to say, but you only have 30 minutes for prep. You only have 7 minutes to deliver your speeches. So by reminding yourself that you can only do so much, it also means that you need to be smart in committing to the debate angle that you want to prioritize. I know that teams don't win because they provided a lot of arguments in the round. Teams win because they were able to convince the judge how important their argument is in the debate. So, yeah, that's it for the team prep lecture. I hope you kill it in nationals. Thank you so much for listening.